I can find it.
Are you excited? Are you excited?
Let's get ready to take. Okay. All right. I'm going to use these for a moment. Okay, so. Oh, yeah, so Hakatri, for anybody who doesn't know and will be otherwise totally puzzled, the only people you really have to know about in this particular section, Hakatri is, as we said, or was alive, no longer is. He has been dead for quite a long time. He has been brought back from death by something called the Three Who Are One, which is a spell, essentially, a magical spell. But the only communication he has had since coming back is with something called the Voice of Three, which is the person who is speaking for the ones who brought him back. That's all he knows. We, the readers, know that this is in fact Utuku, the Norn Queen, who is a bad manajama and does not have anybody's best interest in mind except her own. So that's who he's been brought back by. But needless to say, after being dead for 1,000 years, he's still a little confused after waking up. So he doesn't entirely know what's going on, why he's been brought back to life. He has been told that the mortals, the humans essentially, have killed his family, which is a kind of complicatedly untrue retelling of what actually happened. And more recently, his own brother was brought back from the dead as the Storm King in Luki and caused all kinds of problems for the entire world. So he does not know the backstory. That's what you have to understand about Hakatri. Okay. Why did you call me back into this world? He asked when he was drawn out of the dark into wakefulness again. Though he had no body of flesh, he still was beset by pain he thought he had left behind with life itself. Oh, sorry, one last note. Just because it's significant, Hakatri died in large part because he and his brother slew a dragon. Hakatri was absolutely inundated, drenched with the dragon's blood, and was in horrible pain for the rest of his living life, and eventually left his family and home to try to find something that would ease his pain somewhat. Though he had no body of flesh, he still was beset by pain he thought he had left behind with life itself, and also tormented by thoughts that would not leave him alone. Why did you pull me out of the blessed unknowing? And how do you wield such might to break the bonds of death itself? Ask no questions, Hakatri of the year dancing, the Voice of Three told him. You have been summoned because only you can do what must be done. You alone of our kind have truly been touched by the blood of the dragon. It burned you, but it also changed you. Only you can create the bridge to that which I need. You alone of our people can compel it to serve my great need. That is our great need, the voice told him. Many have felt great need since Gengiana the nightingale led us out of the garden and into these new lands. Hakatri felt a wave of displeasure from the voice at his mention of Gengiana, which puzzled him. But few of our folk have ever had the craft to drag the dead back from their rest. How is it that I live again, if this can be called life? You wallow in your own suffering, said the Voice of Three, and he felt the sting of its scorn. Do you not see that you have been honored beyond all other garden folk, Hakatri? I convened the Three Who Are One, the mightiest spell that has ever been sung in these lands, just to bring you back. And I must draw continuously on that strength to keep you in this world of the living. Though each moment the song goes on, it costs me greatly. But I do it for our people, to save us from the mortal vermin who destroyed our land and murdered your family. Will you not do all you can? It was meant to shame him. Even in his dreamlike confusion, he could sense that. But instead, it struck a spark of resistance. And which one are you who speaks for all the three? That is not your concern. The thought voice softened now. It is very hard for you, as only I of all who live truly know, because I too have traveled in the realms beyond the veil and know how different things there can be. You are weary at being pulled back into existence, racked with pain you thought left behind, and confused by both memories and things that seem like memories but are only dreams. Trust none of them. Hear only my voice. These words put doubt in his mind. Could it be true? Might some of his recollections be phantoms, things that never happened? If so, then what was real? He knew he was Hakatri of the Zidaya, and he knew he had died after years of suffering, but everything beyond that now seemed doubtful. Sleep again, prince of here dancing, said the voice of three, and he felt a power beyond the words take hold of him. A great task lies before you, but it is not yet time. Sleep and rest. You have been awakened for a great purpose, one that will bring your people glory and a lasting peace, a purpose that you alone can accomplish. The questions that still troubled him began to fray and drift away like mist dispersed by a fresh breeze. The voice spoke truly, he decided. Too much thought only brought unhappiness. Exhausted, he once more surrendered to emptiness. Again, he drifted up into wakefulness, but this time he could not discern what had roused him. The voice of three had not spoken, but something had reached him in the void as he drifted, neither dead nor alive, neither completely asleep nor truly awake, a mote of suffering in a great and indistinguishable void. Is it time? He wondered. Am I to perform the great task the voice of three spoke of? And then be released into blessed oblivion once more? Because something had summoned him. He knew that to be true, though he could not say how or why. He tried to search outside himself for what had reached him, but the senses that had fed him in life were now being starved. In the darkness of his sarcophagus, sight meant nothing, and the heavy navigator's helmet of bronze, crystal, and golden wires denied him sound and scent as well. But even in death, he could remember what it was like to feel. Even during the agonizing misery of his life's final days, as his ship sailed pointlessly on and he writhed helplessly in his berth, he had still been able to smell rock roses, rosemary, and the sweet tang of sea buckthorn drifting to him from the nearby coast. Consumed by his pain, then he had barely noticed their scents. But now that he was sealed away in the navigator's armor, like a tomb offering in an ancient stoppered jar, he remembered and yearned to feed those senses once more. But something had awakened him. He knew, and though anything but insensibility brought him back to terrible pain, suffering was Hakatri's old and familiar companion, and it could not keep him from wanting to feel. So, deep in his dark prison, he struggled now to find what had awakened him. After a period of searching the emptiness, he found it again, at last. A faint but ordered throbbing. Something he knew he had never felt before, although it also seemed oddly familiar. Rising and falling, it had the form and cadence of music. Music? He wondered. Could the dead hear music? Hakatri had grown used to floating in darkness and silence, except for the occasional intrusion of the voice of three. In the brief moments that the voice had brought him out into the world of the living, he had perceived what lay beyond his prisoning armor as a madness of unrecognizable forms and dim flashes. But now his attention was caught, and Hakatri felt himself truly awake for the first time since he had been dragged back into this strange afterlife. And something in him resonated to the music's distant strains, even longed to join with it. But in his prisoning sarcophagus, it seemed he could only yearn toward it, as a man dying of thirst might ache at the sound of falling water he could not reach. What is out there, beyond my prison? I want to know. This was an entirely new thought. Where does that music come from? Am I the only one who can feel its call? Driven by an urge he had not felt in so long he could not identify it, he reached out and tried to form a perception of life and movement outside of his unbodied self. As he narrowed his thought, he could even begin to separate these presences into individual clusters. Each one, he realized, must represent some kind of living thing. Many such presences were gathered around him, some moving, some still. Excited by this new freedom, Hakatri let his thoughts continue drifting outward, out beyond the living creatures clustered around him. As his awareness expanded, he began to perceive little eddies of thought from these shades. But the thoughts were small, little more than the rote performance of life among the living. Could such small, insignificant things as these have brought me back from the place I was? No, their presences are too small. They must be the living servants of the voice of three. But something other than these shadows had caught at him, had sparked his dreamy interest, and now that he had sensed it, he clutched at it tightly. At first only dimly, as he might once have watched toward a river for some time before recognizing its murmur. But as he fixed his attention on the distant, inexplicable music, he could sense it was something more powerful than anything else around him, even the voice of three. And it sang. Separate and unique from anything else in the dark obscurity of Hakatri's surroundings, it sang. And in some way, the song found a resonance in Hakatri himself, as if the armor that held him captive somehow also heard the song and even rang in sympathy with its slow, complicated music in matching, chiming tones. An unexpected resonance he could feel in his very being. For the first time, the sheath of crystal and gold in which he was prisoned was bringing something to him, instead of merely sealing him away from life. As he fixed his thoughts on the music, he could hear the inexplicable song more and more clearly. He could feel the song, and it called to him. Hakatri summoned his strength, determined to follow the mysterious melody. He had no body, though. It was not the play of muscles and bones he fought to accomplish, but a thing much stranger, the pure hardening of will, moving his nerveless, fleshless body and thus moving its casing of armor was a matter of cold calculation, of decision after complicated decision. He lifted the gauntlets that should have had hands inside and formed them in the shape that hands would make. When the glove's empty fingers finally spread, he pushed upward on the sarcophagus lid with the force that a body would have given him. At first, nothing happened, and Hakatri despaired. He could not even be certain whether his hands and arms had moved at all. He tried again, ignoring the pain that nearly always tormented him, even though he had no body to be tormented, as if the dragon's blood had burned not just his skin and bone, but his very spirit. Then he narrowed his will until he became nothing except an upward force, and at last the lid tilted, and an angled beam of light played across the scratched crystal of his helmet's eye holes. The weak glow was only the shadowed interior of his wagon, but it felt as redemptive as sunrise. He could not have guessed how long it took him to struggle out from the massive witchwood box. His armored movements were grotesquely slow and difficult, but the lure of the mysterious song had now supplanted all else. It seemed to promise to return everything he had lost: senses, understanding, even his freedom. It called, and slowly, agonizingly, he shambled out of the wagon and into the blindingly bright starlit night to answer that